He's standing on a rocket, not sitting, not reclined like every other fighter pilot in history, standing straight up, strapped into a tube, staring at the sky through a windshield, pointed at nothing but clouds. This is July 25, 1959, 9th flight. The French built a jet that takes off standing on its tail like a firework and lands the exact same way, straight down, blind. In the next few seconds, he's going to lose it completely. That pilot, standing on a rocket, staring at the sky, that's not even close to the weirdest airplane ever made. It's just the first one. Because it turns out, engineers spent most of the 20th century looking at how a plane is supposed to work, and occasionally deciding, not this time. Some of these were built out of pure Cold War panic. Some were built because one designer refused to accept that's not how it's done. One of them accidentally pointed toward the jet age without meaning to. Some worked, some very much did not. So the real question isn't how weird airplanes got. It's what happens when the people building them get desperate enough or stubborn enough that, does this make sense, stops being the question at all. That pilot survived his answer. Not everyone on this list did. Here's the thing nobody tells you about the Cold War. It didn't just build weapons. It built paranoia, dressed up as engineering. By the mid-1950s, military planners were fixated on one nightmare, a first strike that wipes out every runway before a single fighter gets off the ground. No runway, no defense. That's it. War over before it starts. So French engineers ask the obvious-sounding question, what if the plane didn't need a runway at all? What if it just stood up and went? That question built the Coleopter. Picture a barrel-shaped fuselage wrapped in a single ring-shaped wing, acting like a duct around the whole aircraft. No taxiing, no strip of asphalt. The entire aircraft tips onto its tail, lights up, and launches straight into the sky. On paper, it was the point defense interceptor that solved the runway problem completely. In the cockpit, it solved nothing. Because during takeoff, the pilot isn't looking at a horizon. There isn't one. He's staring straight up at the sky with no natural reference point at all, flying an aircraft that's fighting gravity in a direction pilots had never trained for. For 8 flights, it held together. Then, on the 9th, at altitude, the aircraft entered a spin the pilot couldn't recover from. Test pilot Auguste Morel ejected. He survived, barely, and the program ended that same day. Turns out, teaching a jet to stand up was the easy part. Teaching a human being to trust his own instincts with no horizon in sight was the problem nobody solved. And the Coleopter wasn't the last aircraft where the idea worked, and the human being inside it was the part nobody designed for. Here's a problem nobody solves cleanly. How do you protect a bomber flying so deep into enemy territory that no fighter has the fuel to escort it there and back? The Air Force's answer, chasing the same Cold War fear as the Coleopter, was to stop escorting the bomber and build a fighter that lives inside it instead. Meet the XF-85 Goblin. Egg-shaped, barely bigger than a car, folding wings, and instead of landing gear, a hook. It launches from a bar inside a giant bomber's belly, fights off enemy interceptors, then has to fly back and re-hook onto that same bar to get home. Sit with that for a second. This pilot's landing strip is a swinging metal bar on a moving bomber thousands of feet up. The flying itself was fine. Docking was the disaster. Turbulence off the mother ship threw the Goblin around like it was threading a needle in a hurricane. Pilots kept missing the hook, bouncing off, forced into emergency landings on skids just to get down in one piece. On top of that, it simply couldn't outfight enemy fighters flying from the ground. The program was scrapped in 1949, Not because the idea was crazy, but because a fighter that can't reliably get home isn't a fighter. It wouldn't be the last aircraft that looked completely sane on paper and completely insane at 300 miles an hour. If you're watching this and thinking, who actually approves these projects? Drop where you're watching from in the comments. I want to know how far this video has traveled. Now here's one that should not have worked, on paper, in theory, or in any sane engineer's judgment. Airplanes are symmetrical for a reason. Weight on one side, weight on the other, balanced right down the middle. It's not a design choice. It's basically the whole rulebook. Designer Richard Vought tore the rulebook up on purpose. One side of the BV-141 holds the engine and tail. The other side is just gone, replaced by a glass observation pod hanging off to the right, with almost nothing blocking the crew's view in any direction. Here's why. Standard reconnaissance planes at the time had a huge blind spot, because the engine sat directly in front of the pilot, killing forward and downward visibility exactly when crews needed it most. Vaught's fix was blunt. Remove the thing blocking the view. All of it. And against every instinct anyone had about how a plane should be built, it flew well. Genuinely well. Not surprisingly okay for something this strange. It never became the standard reconnaissance aircraft, though. Not because it failed in the air, because military leadership lost confidence in unconventional designs, and factory space got handed to standard fighters instead. Only a handful of these ever flew operationally. It didn't lose to physics. It lost to people who didn't trust their own eyes. This wouldn't be the last time the weirdest-looking idea in the room was also the one that actually worked. Show this aircraft to someone with zero context and they won't guess fighter plane. They'll guess flying saucer. This is the Vought V-173, and unlike the last two, this one might be the biggest missed opportunity on this entire list. The Navy wanted something almost contradictory. A carrier fighter that could land at impossibly slow speeds, nearly hover on approach, and still hit real top speed in combat. The V-173 was the proof of concept, a lightweight wood and fabric test aircraft to prove the disc-shaped design could actually fly. It worked so well that Vought built a militarized, all-metal version for the Navy called the XF-5U, with the same shape but real combat performance in mind. Either version, the idea is the same. Make the entire aircraft one giant flat wing, with two engines buried deep inside, driving propellers all the way out at the wingtips. On paper, that shape should be a drag nightmare. Instead, it nearly eliminated the stall altogether, the thing that normally makes slow flying dangerous. The problem wasn't the aerodynamics, it was the mechanics. Long drive shafts running from the engines out to the wingtip propellers vibrated violently and were brutal to maintain. Structurally, though, it worked. Short takeoffs that should have been impossible were routine, and then the jet age arrived before it was fully ready, and a propeller-driven pancake fighter, however brilliant, was suddenly a solution to a problem the Navy didn't have anymore. Here's the part nobody gets to know for sure. Nobody ever recorded what its actual top speed or full carrier performance would have looked like in production. Which means somewhere out there, there's an alternate version of the 1950s where the Navy's fastest carrier fighter is shaped like a dinner plate. Genuinely curious what you think that number would have been. Drop it in the comments. Not every aircraft on this list was chasing a war. This one was chasing a math problem, and it just happened to look like a flying oil drum while doing it. Italian engineer Luigi Stipa built the entire fuselage as a giant tube, with the propeller and engine buried completely inside instead of mounted out front. His theory: force the air to compress as it moves through that tube, and you get more thrust out of the same engine. The result got named after him, the Stipa-Caproni. In 1932, it actually flew. That part of his theory held up. Here's the twist though. It flew so stable that pilots found it genuinely hard to maneuver. Stability wasn't the problem. The problem was that giant barrel-shaped body created so much drag it canceled out every efficiency gain the design was supposed to deliver. Top speed, 81 miles an hour. Crawling, even by 1932 standards. The concept got shelved. Not because Stipa was wrong about compressing airflow. He wasn't. He just built the one aircraft that could prove his own theory right in the lab and wrong in the sky at the exact same time. Not every idea on this list gets to end on a clean win or a clean loss. This one gets both, in the same flight. Here's where this list gets dark for a minute. By 1921, Italian aviation pioneer Gianni Caproni looked at the airplane, a machine that could barely carry a handful of people at the time, and decided the real problem was obvious: not enough wings. So he built the Caproni Ca.60 Noviplano, 9 wings total, stacked in 3 sets of 3, powered by 8 engines, designed to carry 100 passengers across the Atlantic as a luxury airliner, decades before commercial flying was anything close to normal. It looked like someone fused a cruise ship with a bookshelf and convinced it to float. On its second test flight, over Lake Maggiore in March 1921, the pilot climbed too steeply. The strain across 9 stacked wings was more than the structure could hold. It broke apart mid-air and came down into the lake in pieces. The wreckage was towed ashore, but the costs were too high, and it was never rebuilt. Not every idea on this list gets a clean lesson wrapped around the failure. Sometimes, the ambition is just bigger than the physics we're ever going to allow, and all that's left afterward is wreckage on a lake and a photograph. Not every strange aircraft on this list was built to be seen. Some were built specifically so the rest of the world wouldn't know they existed. This is the Bartini-Beriev VVA-14, and it's genuinely hard to categorize. Part flying boat, part hovercraft, designed to take off from open water and either skim the waves riding on a cushion of trapped air or climb up and fly like a normal jet. The reason it existed sounds like something out of a spy film. At the height of the Cold War, the Soviet Navy needed something that could rapidly hunt and destroy American nuclear submarines across entire oceans before those subs could ever launch. Designer Robert Bartini got the core concept flying, but the extra lift engines needed to make the whole system fully work never got solved. Endless delays, endless dead ends. Only 2 of these were ever built. When Bartini died in 1974, the program didn't crash, and it didn't get canceled in a headline. It just stalled. Quietly, the surviving aircraft sat abandoned outdoors for decades, mostly unknown outside a small circle of Soviet engineers. Some aircraft fail loudly, in front of everyone, like the Ca.60 just did. This one just stopped, the same way it had lived its entire short life, in secret. Quick gut check before we keep going. If you're enjoying this, hitting like actually does more for this channel than you'd think. It's a small thing, but it tells YouTube to show this to more people who genuinely enjoy it too. Fast forward past the Cold War, and the same instinct, build it in secret, worry about explaining it later, never actually went away. It just got quieter. This is the Boeing Bird of Prey, built in secret in the 1990s, funded by the company itself before the military ever got involved. Its entire job: test radical stealth shapes and camouflage concepts. Nobody outside the project was allowed to see. No weapons, never meant for combat. This was a company proving it could push stealth technology forward, faster than a massive government-run program, on its own terms. It flew 38 times, and this time, unlike almost everything else on this list, it actually did exactly what it was built to do. It proved that genuinely radical, jagged airframe shapes could be kept stable using onboard computers, something that would have been impossible to fly by hand. The program ended quietly in 1999, not from failure, but because it had already succeeded, and its lessons fed directly into the stealth and drone designs that came after it. Some of the weirdest airplanes on this list weren't built to win a war. They were built to win an argument about how fast an idea could move if nobody was allowed to slow it down. After all that, rockets, docking fighter jets, secret Soviet sea skimmers, here's the strangest twist on the entire list. One of these aircraft isn't secret, isn't dangerous, and isn't a failure at all. It's just doing its job, in plain daylight, right now. You ever look at a plane and think there's no way that thing should fly? That's the Airbus Beluga. Airbus builds different parts of the same aircraft all over Europe. Wings in one country, tail sections in another, fuselage pieces somewhere else entirely. They needed something big enough to carry fully assembled, oversized aircraft parts between factories without taking them apart first. So they built a plane shaped like it swallowed another plane whole. It became such a success that Airbus has since built an even bigger version to keep up with demand. Every other aircraft on this list got weird, chasing a war, a fear, or an ego. The Beluga just got weird chasing logistics, and it's the one entry on this entire list that never had a single dramatic failure attached to its name. This might be a good moment to send this one to a friend who'd argue the Beluga looks ridiculous. Trust me, they need to see this. Which brings us to the biggest one. Not the weirdest looking, the biggest, period. The largest, heaviest, most powerful airplane ever built by human beings. Its name was the Antonov An-225. The Soviets called it Mriya, which means dream. 6 engines, a wingspan of nearly 290 feet. Built by the Soviet Union for exactly one job, carrying a space shuttle strapped to its spine, from the factory where it was built to the launch site where it would fly. One job. That's it. Nobody expected this aircraft to become anything else. Only one complete airframe was ever finished. When the Soviet shuttle program ended, the aircraft built specifically to carry it lost its purpose right along with it, and then it found a second life anyway. It was turned into a commercial titan, hauling loads nothing else on the planet could move. Industrial generators, entire locomotive trains, cargo flown into places that had no other way of receiving it. It set hundreds of world records and became an international aviation icon. In February 2022, during the opening days of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it was destroyed on the ground. The only one ever built, gone. Every aircraft on this list was built to answer a question someone was desperate or stubborn or afraid enough to ask. This one answered its question so completely that it outlived the country that built it. And then it didn't outlive the war that came after. Look back at all 10 of these, and a pattern shows up that none of them saw at the time. Every one of these aircraft looks insane in the photo, but none of them were built by people trying to be strange. They were built by people staring at a real problem. No runway, no escort range, no visibility, no efficient engine, and refusing to accept the normal-looking answer, because the normal-looking answer wasn't going to work. Weird wasn't the goal. Weird was just what necessity looked like once every obvious option had already failed. And that's the part that's easy to miss watching this list 100 years later. The aircraft that seemed the most ridiculous in hindsight were usually the ones asking the most honest questions. Some of those questions got answered with a crash into a lake. Some got answered by quietly becoming the plane that reshapes an entire industry, sitting in plain sight, looking completely normal to everyone who doesn't know its story. You never really know which one you're looking at until decades later. There's one aircraft that took this even further than anything on this list. Designed around a form of lift that's technically closer to flying a boat than flying a plane. The Soviet Union built one that could skim the ocean at 300 miles an hour. It's called an ekranoplan. And after decades of sitting retired, it's coming back. If this channel is the kind of thing you want more of, subscribing genuinely is the easiest way to make sure you don't miss the next one. And there's a full playlist of videos just like this one, on screen right now if you want to keep going. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.